Good morning, guys. Good morning. Good morning. How's everybody doing today? It is Thursday, July 29th. Beautiful Thursday morning. I cannot believe the week is almost over. That is crazy. It's been a long week, though. Hasn't been the easiest week ever, but we are getting through one day at a time. Yesterday should have been really, really nice. Made some really good trades yesterday, so I think we're feeling good going into today. Who saw Nikola founder? Yeah, Trevor Milton just indicted on federal charges in the Nikola Motors scandal. So let's see what they're doing in pre-market. Take a look really quick. Yeah, and then gap down. I still think it's crazy they're trading at like $8 billion market cap or something like that. It's insane. But anyway, guys, I'm going to give everyone like a minute to get in here, and then we're going to get right into it. So I don't want to probably chase puts on Nikola this morning, but, who knows? Might offer a nice opportunity. Good morning, guys. Good morning. All right, so I'm going to kind of jump right into it. There's a few things that I really want to focus on this morning. Sorry, let me fix this for you guys first. Cool. All right, guys. So there's going to be a few main focuses that I have today. Obviously, by the looks of pre-market, you can tell the marijuana theme is extremely hot. Tilray broke that 1650 resistance that we talked about. It's kind of the first sector that I want to go over. So we'll talk about that first. SNDL overnight was nice. Gave us a nice little 3-4%. Should have been. So Tilray currently pushing that 17 level now. We talked about it last night, but you can see off early in pre-market this morning, once we took out that 1650 level, they were protecting this level really hard yesterday, right? If we zoom out, right, we rejected it multiple times, but we were basing, right? It's really important to, when a stock is forming a base, right, that's what we want to see for bullish continuation, right? We want to see, higher lows, right? It goes back to the very basic fundamentals of, the levels, right? And, we break this level. Obviously, yesterday talked about it, broke 1450 with volume, see this massive move up to 16, right? Reject that 16 level, finally break it, come back, right? And then look what level it retests, right? The 1565 level, which was a big point of resistance because we gapped up above it, right? Came back down, touched VWAP. And then, obviously we steadily kind of climbed, tested that 1650 resistance into the close yesterday. But then when we pulled back, right, we noticed this, right, which was that, we were forming this higher low, right, trend. And then, it's basing off of this 16 level. It never really gave the 16 level back, which is really important to note because that was the only reason that I held those, the SNDL and ACB calls overnight is because when you see Tilray, which is the leader in the sector, I missed this move off open. I know a bunch of you caught it from the pre-market live, but instead of chasing that gap up, what I did is I ended up taking ACB, which was a sympathy, gave us a great move. But when we saw that move and we see it start to base here, right? We see that base forming at that 16 level, even into the close when we pulled back, an ACB pulled back, an SNDL pulled back. I've traded this exact move on these names so many times, right? If you were in here at the very beginning of the Patreon, you remember playing SNDL calls almost in this exact same situation. We got them at 1, they ended up going to 8, right? The 800% move, before the stock even got in the money, and it was the same setup Wednesday or Thursday, right? So that was why I felt comfortable holding them overnight. And, I thought that once I saw Tilray basing at that 16 level, which used to be our resistance point, now is becoming support, that made me bullish for a move up overnight, especially because I mentioned it yesterday on Twitter, but I think we're seeing this transition right now of money, right? You saw Apple was kind of down yesterday. I think a lot of the big funds are leaving Apple, taking profits and they're getting their money back into the smaller cap and mid cap names like Tilray, the ACBs, right? But more predominantly a little bit, some of those names that trade are a little bit bigger of a market cap, right? We're seeing like the Tilray and the some of the energy names, JKS, things like that are starting to get the volume coming back in, which I don't think is predominantly retail. I think that's a lot of institutional money leaving big tech and kind of going into the growth sector now, because that was what was down. So it's like the buy the dip mentality. And like I said, we based off that 16 level. I felt comfortable taking them overnight. We see this major move up in pre-market, right? And as soon as I mentioned yesterday on Twitter, I said if it breaks 1650, right? We didn't get that move during post-market hours, or what about more SNDL, but we see this big move up, tested 17 this morning. So now we just need to make sure, obviously, we confirm 1650 off open for continuation on the weed plays. That's what I want to see, right, is a move to 1650. I think that would be a nice place to add calls. In my opinion, if we go to the daily, I think Tilray definitely has room to the 18 area. I think that, obviously I had that 16 level, 5 level marked on the daily. I think 17 may give us a little bit of resistance, like I mentioned, but over that, right, we have this really nice gap, probably to that 19 area. I think we may, probably see a little bit of resistance in this 18 range. I mentioned the 18.3 area is what I was going to target over that. But really the 19.2 area is what I would target if we can just obviously confirm over 17 right today. So yeah, Tilray looks great. And obviously like the themes are obviously causing their sympathies to kind of carry with them. ACB in the money, I believe still. Yeah, it was at 1654. Touched 1663, 1662 this morning on the top of that 5 a.m. candle when Tilray broke out. This one lags hard, but I would not be surprised to see a move to 8 this week. Even by the end of the week, I'm not really stressing about this. I don't have a ton of money in these calls. Obviously, they're still very much like lottery calls, but I think the 1830 level, if we can get above 760, right, like 767, they were protecting that level too. But once those calls get in the money, right, there's a lot of open interest. So we should see a nice move. I think, 830 is not out of the question. 840 is not out of the question, right? Because we have this big candle on the daily. I would not be surprised to see it fill back up. So I feel really bullish about that. SNDL, the other one, I want to just cover these because I think that as much as we already have, a position in them, I think that these can offer a good opportunity again. So, obviously testing this 89 resistance in pre-market. Truthfully, above that, I think we see the psychological level of 1. Maybe we hit 97, but we might reject. But if we get a move to 95 today, 96, we should see at least a 500 to 600% move on those SNDL lottos. And if we can get a move above 1, then I think the 112, 108 area is really in play here. Zoom out a little bit on the daily. I think we fill that gap up to the 110, kind of psych level resistance. So I think there's a lot of room up on these charts, which is why I loved it. So I think it's still a really nice move for today. Don't chase, obviously. We're already we're in low. That's why I didn't want to sell everything yesterday and go into today without the exposure and feel like I have to chase off open. When stocks are picking up momentum like this and you see this transfer of money from large tech to smaller cap growth, I like to be in the moves before they happen. I hate chasing more than anything. You guys know that. That's why I play the sympathy plays. The last thing I want to do, I feel like I've been a much better risk management oriented trader since I started doing that. So I've continued it, and it's worked pretty well for me. Do I like Kern as a stock? I like Kern when the weed plays actually start to go silly, right? If we start getting this 150, 140 move on SNDL, right? I think that Kern will probably pick up, but as of right now, IGC is one that I want to focus on today too. I think that this one will see a move, even though it is usually a huge lagger on the sympathy market, right? If you look on the hourly chart, we just had this massive move, right? To 450 or 448 or whatever, right? The other day. So I think that this can see a really nice move because of the fact that we just saw a huge run on it, right? They had good news as far as their Alzheimer's drug studies. So I would watch that 220 level really closely. If we do clear that 220 level, then the next spot I see is 250, and above that, really 250, like 270 area is big resistance. But if we clear that, the gap is crazy. So, and we're not in that type of market where we're seeing these crazy gap fills, but I still think this can see a really, really nice move. So, on the larger cap side of things, my focus today is going to be BABA. And what a move we saw overnight. I mean, could not have asked for a better trade. This was one of those trades that was just like yelling at my soul to take overnight. It was like, for some reason, I felt like the move we were seeing is like, because, partially because it had been down so much, right, over the last 5 days, right? Like, I mean, we saw this massive move down. We're literally trading at a 216 level, less than a week ago, right? Like 4 or 5 days ago. So for me, I wish I had been down at that 170 level as far as a dip buy in like the longer term. That would have been a great ad spot. But as far as the short term, I saw this consolidation off the 192 level yesterday. The China stocks are still strong. I believe this momentum will continue. And I also believe that we're now in this gap fill territory, right? And this is very similar to what we saw in AMD yesterday, right? The trigger hit overnight, except, AMD trigger hit during the day. But what we're seeing right now is the triggers hit, right? We've broken this key level. This is where we have this like nasty candle from, what was that? I believe like last week, right? It was like the 26th, 26th, yeah, 26th, 25th, 26th, right? We see this nasty gap down from, 206 all the way down to the 200 level, right? So once we break 200, I think we see 206, 207 very quickly. We'll probably see some big resistance to the 207 area, but if those 205 calls are inexpensive off open, the premiums were trading pretty weird yesterday, but I believe that this can see a really, really nice move. Obviously, our calls are going to be in the money off open, now like $1.38 in the money. So we should see a really, really nice move. Yeah, and all the Chinese stocks do have the same chart. That's a fantastic observation. That's why I played TAL yesterday. That's why I'm in YQ right now, right? Is I think I love the moves off like dead bottoms, right? Because the risk reward is so good, even on like weekly calls, because there's really like, how much farther can they really go down? I mean, sure, something could delist or whatever, but I don't foresee that type of movement, nor am I risking anything to the point where I'm worried about that, right? You guys literally saw I literally had like $4,000 in VABA, which, is not a ton for me to have in a position that's like a third of my normal position size, if that. And I did scale a few out just to protect my downside a little bit. I never just hold full on any trade, but this is going to be a really fantastic idea off open, in my opinion. What I want to see off open on the shorter time frame side of things, right, is what I want to see is I want to see us confirm this $200 psych level resistance. If we get the dip down to like 200, like 208, 2015, like to, the 50 cent, right, like level, that would be the spot for me to add the 205 weekly call. It's risky, right? Like I can't call that anything other than a lotto, but for me, it's a higher confidence lotto. And I'll say that sometimes because it's like I'm expecting the move to happen because of the levels, but it's still a weekly call with 1 day to expiration. I don't want somebody to see that and, follow my trade and then, put way too much money in a weekly call, right? It's a weekly call. A lot of traders tend to forget that these are risky, but, it's all about managing your risk. So I don't want to put too much in and possibly give some back, but because I already do have some nice size in these, but I think this is a really nice move. Like I said, I want to see 200 confirm off open. As long as we confirm that, I'm not going to chase a gap up. If we gap up to like 204 off open, that adding more calls would be invalidated for me, which kind of looks like it might happen just because of the sheer buying volume. But if we get that little dip, that red candle strategy off open, that's going to be a big ad spot for me on the 205 weekly call. So yeah, and AMD was going to be the other one that I want to focus on today. Yeah, so AMD is consolidating in this range right now. I truly do believe this makes the move over 100 really soon. And I think that when we see this move over 100, because you need to look at the weekly to understand why this move is going to be so, the type of move it's going to be, right? This is going to be a parabolic move once it finally breaks. Even if you look at the monthly, right? Like this is like a historical resistance of $100, right? You know, call it psych level, call it whatever you want, but you know, for the past 5 years, literally all-time chart, we're talking about like an all-time resistance here at $100. Once we break that, I would not be surprised to see a $10, $12 breakout above that level. So when it happens, I think it's going to be a fantastic trade to be in. A lot of you guys didn't wait for the trigger yesterday and it ended up paying off big, right? Like you ended up taking that trade a little bit early off open if you bought that dip, and a lot of people took 1,000, 1,500% on those calls. Congratulations. I've done that before too. It's high risk, high reward to not wait for the trigger and just get in the trade. But for me, I would like to see the trigger hit. If I see strong enough buying pressure like we did yesterday, again today, then I'll take the 100 call weeklies, because this is like, again, even though they're, the premiums are a little bit high. That's the only thing that I'm personally worried about with AMD is I think that everybody saw like a 7.5% run yesterday. So if we pull back to the 95 level, that's probably a good spot to add calls for next week. But, what I want to see as far as a short-term trade on weeklies, what I want to see is that move towards the 100 break. I might take a starter at like 98 if we get there, right? And then, take a starter, right? If we get a pullback at open, even take a starter. If it pays, great. If not, right, don't take a lot of size would be, in my opinion, that's what my plan is going to be. So I love AMD. Like I said, I think once we get over 100, I think we see that move. As far as if we do see a pullback, what would I want to see? I would want to see a move to confirm the 95 level, right? That it was our old resistance, right? Now we want that to become strong support, because look at every time that we've touched this level on the daily recently or on the weekly, like recently, right? Every time we've touched that 95 level, we rejected hard, right? Like we've come down the next day and then maybe we try to regain it, but it's always been these like really wicky candles. We can't quite get a full candle close over that level. And yesterday we saw a really, really nice daily candle, right? Like if you zoom in a little bit more, we saw a fantastic close yesterday. So I would not be surprised to see this move happen. Even though it's obviously going to be extremely overextended after that. That's the move I want to see. If we retest 95, that's an add spot for me for next week's calls. I think it would make a 100 move very hard this week. If we just pull back to like maybe 97, I'll probably take a small like lotto starter on the 100C and then focus on a move after that and adding on the trigger point, right? So yeah, 99.45. Yeah, if you couldn't wait for I would wait for the 100 psych level trigger, because I think that's going to be a major psychological spot for people, right? They're going to want to see that 100 tick confirm on a 1 minute candle, just like I did yesterday. I waited for the 95 break, saw it confirm over 95 too, immediately entered those calls, and they ended up going like 600% or 500% or whatever, right? So fantastic trade. I obviously didn't hold as long as I wish I should have or could have, but we're past it. It's on to the next mentality. Max just mentioned Max, good eye. I was going to talk about that. Facebook is going to be my one other watch today. If we flush super hard at open, I think adding calls is nice, right? Like I would look for a move down to that 397 or like 357.85 level. It's kind of our lows here, and it was also kind of like exactly what we saw with Apple yesterday, right? We bought the flush, off open, sell off after earnings, right? And then buy that flush. And then, obviously it makes a really great move. So Lottos didn't print for Facebook ER, sucks. On to the next, right? Same thing with Visa, But, that's what I'm going to be looking for on Facebook. I'm not going to chase Facebook off open. What I am going to look for is the 357 test. If we get that, that's a load spot for me. I'd probably load the 360 call weekly there. Premiums are still going to be probably pretty high on Facebook, so just obviously mind your risk. Don't get too, don't get in the trade without a thesis and a plan, right? And the last thing I want to talk about before I head out, is ARK. Really, really strong day for ARK yesterday. Fantastic buying volume, really nice candle. We have a really important resistance level to break here, and that's the 123 level. Over that 123 level, we should see a really big move in the small cap and mid cap growth names, right? Like DDD, Tilray, Teladoc, right? Like all these growth names that are in that Cathie Wood index, right? And that's going to give us a really nice move. But we need to break that level to see that 132 level. If we reject back down, that would be a bearish sign for that. But in my opinion, with the way the small caps are trading now and the volume that we saw yesterday, we will break this 123 level in my opinion today, and just see obviously continuation in that overall sector within the market. So that's going to be my focus today. Nothing too overcomplicated. Going to keep it simple. Going to keep it simple, stupid, right? We just focus on what's been working. And like I said, I want to see continuation in these names, but obviously I'm very very excited about our prospects today, just with how well I think this is when I excel, guys. This is my forte is the mid cap, Tilray, DDD, right? Like all these names that are now seeing these moves, right? Like the theme plays are my thing. That's just I realize what I'm good at. I realize what I'm not as great at, right? Like I'd love to be an even better large caps trader. I think I'm getting there. I obviously can have an eye for it, but this is where I really do have a knack for just kind of seeing the moves and remembering exactly what happened last time. I've talked about it before. I'm not trying to brag in any way, shape, or form. Just a strength of mine is I have a good memory. So I'm really familiar with how these moves played out last time. So I feel like I'm very prepared for the moves this time, and that's what's really, really important. And you have to remember that you want to focus on your strengths, right, and then just work on your weaknesses. Nobody's perfect. Nobody has the same brain, so just focus on the A+ setups and don't overcomplicate things, and we're going to be in a good spot. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get that watch list out on Twitter, and then we are going to get started for the day. Again, main watches off open are going to be the AMD calls, and I'm also going to watch BABA very, very closely for that 200 retests, and then just making sure Tilray confirms off 16 for continuation in weed plays. If Tilray was to go below 1650, I would probably stop out of some of the weed names, not off open if it just flushes really quickly. Wait for a confirmation below 1650. Obviously don't stay in things like too long, but for me, I'm in them. We're bouncing off VWAP right now, so that's my plan for today, guys. Tao still looks good with China names going. So, all right, guys, I'm going to get the watch list out. I hope you guys have a fantastic morning, and I will see you guys on the Twitter. Have a great day, guys. Take it easy, and let's stay green.